without further ado, let's welcome on our Pro Football Network NFL Draft and College Football Analyst, Ian Cummings, because guess what, ladies and gentlemen? We have more college football stuff coming up. We have the Shrine Bowl on Thursday of next week, and I tell you what, a lot of action there. Ian, my friend, how you doing? Thank you for joining me here today. My man, we got to unmute. There we go. We got him. He's back.
All right, I think we're good now. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, my friend. Hey, it's good to see you, Ian.
Every time, man, I swear, it never fails. It never fails. I got to work on that. That's my scouting report. Areas for improvement. Leaves himself on mute too many times, but I'm doing good now that you can actually hear me. This is it's the bowl game circuit, Shrine game, and the Senior Bowl. It's a great time, and it's a great time for prospects because it's kind of a controlled environment where you can see them succeed, outside of scheme. A lot of guys are dependent on scheme sometimes, so it's good to see how their traits shine through. I'm always excited for this time of year.
Obviously, weeks of practice, going through the whole process there. Obviously, there's the Collegiate Bowl that happens tomorrow. The NFL Network, I know our good friend Ollie Hodgkinson joined us early on the week to preview that. The Shrine Bowl next Thursday. Obviously, we're going to have boots on the ground for Pro Football Network. Then, as you mentioned, the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. I mean, it is going to be busy times here for the college football and NFL draft community. Real quick, Ian, here. I know Matthew Canada likes to give you crap here. He says in the chat, Ian, what trophy is that? So what trophy is that in the background there for you?
Honestly, I think it's my older brothers. I didn't win many trophies as a kid, man. I had grit. That was it. I had grit. But
I love it.
I won a coach's award for swimming. But that's in my room. This is my older brother's room. So I'll have to ask him. I can maybe rebrand it or something if I got
the best sleeper award according to Canada here. So we'll see.
Yeah, he's got to get one of those in there every time, man. It's never gonna get old. I wish it would, but it won't.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. He's getting all the mileage you can out of that. But yeah, I don't know whose it is, but yeah, I'll have to think of something beside best sleeper. Not that. That's off the table.
Well, obviously, thank you once again, Ian, for joining us here today. Let's preview the Shrine Bowl. Now, I think, obviously, when you take a look at this matchup on Thursday, everyone's keeping their eyes on various players. I know there's a couple you're going to highlight here, but what position groups should football fans, people who are going to watch the game, observe the most? Who should they most pay attention to?
Yeah, and I'll preface with this. I think you should pay attention to everything, honestly. Now, obviously, that's hard to do, right? Like, you only have so much in your periphery that you can analyze, right? Like, you can't look at every single little detail. But, at least get these guys' names in your head, and keep them there because anyone can stand out at these practices. It really just takes one rep and you can set yourself apart, right? With that being said, though, we don't have time to talk about every single guy. So we gotta be a little selective sometimes. So the position groups that I am most excited to see at the Shrine Bowl, the position groups that I looked at and I said, these are the ones that are pretty stacked with talent: wide receiver, defensive line, and defensive back. I really love the crop of players that they got. Now, obviously, a few guys got elevated to the Senior Bowl. I know Kirby Joseph from the defensive backs group, Christian Watson. Ali loves that guy. He got elevated to the Senior Bowl too. So a few guys moving on, but there's still a lot of talent in this group and a lot of guys that I think are severely underrated right now and may start to elevate their profile as we get through the season. So it's a great group overall. But I think wide receiver, defensive back, defensive line, those are the ones that stood out to me.
Well, let's take a look at one wide receiver as well. You talk about Baylor wide receiver, Kwon Thornton. I mean, give us your initial thoughts and your prognosis on maybe one thing you're looking at from him this week in the Shrine Bowl.
Yeah, he's a fun player, man. At 6'3", 190, a little underweight, but he's got real track speed. I mean, he opens up those strides in open field and he's gone, man. He's got 4.4 speed. And then also down the field, he's got the length in the frame to contort and extend for passes. So obviously, that field stretching speed and that ability to, win contested situations, that's big for him. For me, what I'm looking for, and for really all these wide receivers and one-on-ones, when you're in your scheme in the offense, a lot of times your scheme can create separation for you. Like for Jareth Stearns, Western Kentucky, that's one thing I wrote down. I think he has the traits to separate, but a lot of times they spread the field with 4 or 5 wide receivers. They got fake screens where, they kind of delay it. They got blockers upfield and that gives you space already. So, in this setting, one-on-one, you're on an island. It's you and the guy across from you, and you got to use your traits to beat him. It's no one but you. You don't have any help. So it's going to be really interesting to see if these guys can create for themselves independent of scheme. I think with Kwon Thornton, because usually with 6'3" guys, a little bit bigger, can't always chop their feet as fast, not always quite as agile, but I think he has the athleticism. So for me, I don't discount, I won't doubt that if he gets in a contested situation, he's got the length to beat his man. but I want to see him create some more separation laterally, use some more deception as a route runner. And that really goes for all these guys. That's what you're looking for. Can they create independent of scheme? Because the guys that can do that, like you can scheme anybody open at the NFL level, but the guys who can do that make the job a lot easier for offensive coordinators.
Oh, yeah, not to mention, I mean, in the NFL, you have the Jerry Judys, the Keenan Allens, and Devontae
Yeah.
Adams, I mean, in terms of route running separation, because it creates more opportunities for themselves. And I know that there's many teams in the NFL that do have the issue where they have guys that can't create separation. That was an issue, I mean, believe it or not, for the Dallas Cowboys early on in the season. There was some talk about the wide receivers. They don't have anybody that can create separation, which when you look at the talent that they have, it's like, it's so wild when you think about it. But I think a lot of it is scheme prevalent there. Now, you talk about wide receivers. I want to talk about the counterpart, the guys that cover the wide receivers. Defensive backfield. Now, one guy to keep an eye on that you sent over was Virginia Tech cornerback Jermaine Waller here. Now, my biggest question to you, just as somebody who hasn't watched Jermaine play just yet, we see in the NFL right now a lot of hybrid defenses. You don't see as often cover zero, cover one, but you do see it, sometime. Primarily, you see a lot of zone defense in the NFL today, which has kind of changed. And I think that's based on the evolution of offense and how spread out and how crazy it is, high octane. It's kind of become like college a little bit. What kind of scheme would best suit him in your opinion here? Is he a guy that, can play press man-to-man coverage, or is he better suited as a disguise off-ball cornerback?
I think he can play. I think he better translates at press. I think you look at him; he's a little longer, a little bit over 6'1". And I know measurements are coming in, so we'll get to see how accurate those are, because I know some of the schools like to tack on a couple inches, but he looks pretty long on tape. You see he can stick to guys. He's got pretty fluid hips, pretty good athleticism, and he's pretty competitive at the catch point too. I like he's shown that he can use his feet first and press. That's one thing that you really look for. You don't want to jab right away and lurch before your base is set. This as a former defensive back. Like, you want to make sure that you get your feet first, then you can jab, then you can go. That's kind of the optimal progression there. And he's shown that. There's a few guys in this class that are good at that. I feel like he's flashed that ability. And then on top of that, being fluid, being explosive, being able to close ground and really compete at the catch point and disrupt the receiver. He's shown that too. He's been pretty productive in those situations. So for me, I'm looking to see if he can stick to guys, guys that are a little smaller, a little more jittery. Can you stick with those guys? And if you can do that, if you can use your length, and if it translates in one-on-one situations, because we know one-on-one situations are usually slanted a little bit toward the wide receiver. Just because if you're a defensive back, you need to have help, like that's always how it is. You can't always be expected to do your job, only by yourself. That's why defenses have these interworking zone man concepts, on the back end, because you need help. Sometimes you get beat a little bit. Sometimes they mess you up with a route concept, some interworking routes. So you really, that's usually how it works. But now on an island, it's really a gridiron and a test to how do your physical traits match up against this guy, and can you use them to lock him down individually, authoritatively. So that's what I'm looking for him. I think he translates more of a man guy, but I do think he has some closing speed. He can kind of flip his hips forward and transfer that weight and get going. So he's got some versatility. I'm excited to see him. And I think that he's one of the more underrated guys in this class. I think he's a little bit underweight, but, to me personally, I look at, do they have the athleticism, the efficiency of motion, and the proactivity as a playmaker? I see all that from him. So that really kind of tantalizes me to see what he can do at the Shrine Bowl.
Well, once you get onto an NFL roster too, the training staff, they'll put you on specific meal plans. I mean, you get that to the college level, but the NFL, it's next level, because they want you, by the time you come into training camp, they want you to be at a certain weight, and they want you to be able to do certain things. And I think that's going to be one thing that helps some of these players. Now, one thing as well that I'll mention is so critical as a DB. You mentioned being able to get in phase, the click and closing speed, being able to fit in on the hip there. You mentioned that too, pre-snap, especially in press. You mentioned not being deceived with your eyes. As a cornerback, I think one of the most important things you need to have outside of speed is great hip movement, like you mentioned, because look, you're going to be contorted a bunch of ways. If you're in press coverage and a wide receiver gives you an outside release, you have to be able to mirror that without committing or turning your shoulders or your hips all the way, but being able to change directions quickly, because often at times off the line of scrimmage, we see guys give outside release, stem back inside. You have to be able to get on that, and you have to be able to step down. And when we talk about angles, like as a DB, you got to understand math. You got to understand 45 degrees, 75 degrees. You got to understand 135 to be able to close the distance, because that's the difference between some guy catching a slant on you, a post route, or even an out route, being able to understand how to get in phase, use your ball side hand, secure the hip, bring it forward. I mean, just fundamentals. That's what I love about DB play the most.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get to see these in those one-on-ones, but I tell you what, Ian, I'm excited about this. Look, we got a lot of college football content coming our way, profootballnetwork.com, Ollie Hodgkinson, Ian Cummings, Cam Miller. They have you covered, ladies and gentlemen. Just go to profootballnetwork.com, click on the college football NFL draft tab. They have everything going, player profiles. I mean, they are studying the tape every single day and updating those as well. Not to mention, you can check out the exclusive glossary of the player profiles that Ian has put together on his Twitter page at Ian_Cummings9. He's got you covered. Ian, I appreciate your insight. As always, anytime I need to know about prospects, I need to know a little bit more football terminology, you're the guy I go to, my friend. Always love your insight.
Yes, sir. And if before we go real quick, if I can drop a few more names, because I know there's a lot of guys. I wrote them down, but wide receiver Tanner Connor, Idaho State, 6'3", well over 200 pounds. He was a Feldman freak, ran a 10.51 100-meter dash and over 40-inch vertical. So he's a guy to watch. Defensive line, Matthew Butler, Tennessee. He's a top 75 prospect for me. He's explosive. He had a 32-inch vertical out of high school. For his size, he's around 6'4", 290. I really like his fit as a 3-tech. Same with Matt Henningsen. He's got a 34.5-inch vertical on record at 6'3", 290. So another very powerful straight line guy. And then at the corner position, you talk about flipping your hips and be able to, overset and flip out after you flip your hips outside. I think Sean Jolly from Appalachian State is a guy who's shown that flexibility with the hips. And then Nick Grant from Virginia too. He's around 6'3", so a little bit bigger, but he's shown that too. When you see those bigger guys that have it, it's really exciting. So, hey, I could go on and on and on. And I got other guys listed, but we're out of time. So I'm not gonna hamstring you guys with that, but just know, like, no name is worth passing on. You got to make sure that you see everyone, you give them that respect and give them that time. And like, hey, does this guy have it? Because a lot of them do. It's really fun to sift through, find the diamonds in the rough, and the Shrine Game is a great place for that.
Absolutely. Ian, I would like to have you back here next Friday because the game's obviously on Thursday of next week. I would love to get you back on so we could recap the Shrine Bowl, your takeaways, standout players, guys who maybe rose up a little bit, surprised you, or also guys that didn't live up to expectations. Would love to get that from you next week. I know our audience here at twitch.tv/Pro Football Network would as well. Once again, Ian, you're the best. Appreciate you, my man. I'll see you next week.
Yep. See you next week.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Ian Cummings. You can get an exclusive index from the great work of our fantasy department and our college football NFL draft department, respectively. Go to profootballnetwork.com. You can click on the fantasy football tab for all the fantasy content. You can click on NFL draft and college football for all the content that all of our analysts at Pro Football Network put the time, effort, and energy into. profootballnetwork.com.